Zefter stepped off the transport ship and immediately felt wrong. The human military base on Kepler 442b looked normal enough. Soldiers walked around doing their jobs. Equipment sat in neat rows. Everything seemed organized and clean. But something in the air made his forearms twitch with unease. "You must be the reporter," a voice said behind him. Zefter turned to see a human male approaching. The man was shorter than most of Zefter's species, but something about the way he moved suggested danger. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome to Forward Operating Base Liberty." Zefter had studied human customs before arriving. He knew to extend one hand for the greeting ritual they called a handshake. Morrison's grip was firm, but not crushing. Professional. "Thank you for allowing me to document your operations, Captain. Just remember the rules we discussed. No recording devices during active operations. No transmission of tactical data. And if I tell you to hit the dirt, you hit the dirt." Morrison's eyes were pale blue, almost colorless. They reminded Zefter of ice. "Come on, I'll show you around." The base tour revealed nothing unusual. Humans ate their meals, cleaned their weapons, and talked among themselves. They seemed friendly enough. A young female lieutenant named Amy Foster showed him the communication center. A sergeant called Carlos Rivera demonstrated some of their explosive devices, making jokes that Zefter didn't understand, but that made the other humans laugh. "So what's your angle?" Morrison asked as they sat in his office that evening. "Most reporters want to know about our advanced weapons or our tactical innovations. What brings an Alcarian all the way out here?" Zefter considered his words carefully. "My species has never understood human military effectiveness. You have been in space for less than 2 centuries, yet you have defeated enemies with 1,000-year-old empires. We want to understand how." Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "Maybe you'll get your answers sooner than you think. We have operations planned for tonight." At 0200 hours, Zefter found himself crouched in tall grass 3 kilometers from an enemy outpost. 12 humans moved around him in the darkness like ghosts. They had painted their faces with dark colors and moved without making any sound. Zefter could barely see them even with his enhanced night vision. The enemy outpost held 30 hegemony soldiers. These were professional warriors from a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. They had better weapons than the humans, better armor, better sensors. By all logical measures, they should have detected the approaching human squad easily. They never saw it coming. Morrison used hand signals that his soldiers understood perfectly. They spread out around the outpost in a pattern that made no sense to Zefter. Some humans moved to what seemed like useless positions. Others took up spots that offered no clear advantages. It looked random and wasteful. Then the killing started dotted. Began with silence. One moment there were 2 hegemony sentries walking their patrol routes. The next moment they were gone. Simply vanished without a sound or struggle. Zefter saw movement in his peripheral vision, but couldn't track what happened. The humans had somehow eliminated both guards simultaneously without alerting anyone else. Lieutenant Foster appeared next to Zefter like a shadow. Her face was painted black and green. Her eyes reflected the starlight like an animal's. "Watch the northwest corner," she whispered. Zefter looked where she indicated. He saw nothing unusual. Then a small explosion lit up the night for half a second. When his vision cleared, the enemy communication array was destroyed. Still no alarms. The hegemony soldiers inside their buildings had no idea they were under attack. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The humans moved through the outpost like a disease. They appeared in doorways, eliminated targets, and vanished before anyone could react. They used knives more than guns. When they did shoot, they used weapons that made almost no sound. Zeftar counted 30 enemy soldiers when they arrived. Within 8 minutes, all 30 were dead. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was how the humans acted during the killing. They didn't seem angry or excited. They worked with the same calm efficiency they showed when cleaning their equipment. Rivera hummed a tune while slitting throats. Foster smiled as she planted explosive charges. Morrison gave tactical commands, in the same tone he used to order lunch. When it was over, they spent 20 minutes arranging the scene. They moved bodies to specific positions. They scattered enemy weapons around to tell a false story. They planted evidence that would make it look like the hegemony soldiers had been killed by their own allies in some kind of dispute. Why? Zeftar asked as they walked away from the outpost. Why what? Morrison replied, why arrange the bodies? Why create false evidence? They're dead. Isn't that enough? Morrison stopped walking and looked at him. Information warfare reporter. Every dead body tells a story. We choose what story it tells. By tomorrow, Hegemony Command will think this outpost was hit by traitors in their own ranks. They'll start questioning their own people, investigating their own soldiers, breaking down their own trust networks. But that's... Zeftar struggled for the word. Deceptive. It's war, Foster said. We don't just kill enemy soldiers. We kill enemy morale, enemy cooperation, enemy certainty. We make them afraid of each other instead of just afraid of us. They walked in silence for several minutes. Zeftar's mind struggled to process what he had witnessed. The humans had committed perfect murder and turned it into psychological warfare. They had weaponized paranoia itself. 3 days later, Zeftar observed another human operation. This time, it was a prisoner exchange. The humans were supposed to trade captured hegemony officers for human prisoners of war. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location with observers from both sides. Zeftar watched from a concealed position as Morrison's team arrived at the exchange point. They brought 3 hegemony prisoners as agreed. The enemy delegation consisted of 12 soldiers and 4 human captives. The negotiations seemed normal at first. Both sides verified the prisoners' identities. They discussed terms and conditions. Everything followed standard military protocols. Zeftar began to relax, thinking this would be a routine diplomatic procedure. Then Morrison asked a simple question. Before we complete the exchange, would you mind if my medic examined our people? We want to make sure they haven't been mistreated. The hegemony commander agreed. Dr. Susan Walsh, the human medic, approached the captive humans with her medical scanner. She moved slowly and professionally, checking each prisoner for injuries or illness. This one has been tortured, she announced, pointing to a male human who looked thin and weak. Multiple electrical burns, evidence of prolonged stress positions. Deliberate nutritional deprivation. The hegemony commander's posture shifted slightly. Combat injuries, he said. This one too, Walsh continued, examining a female captive. Same torture patterns, same techniques. Morrison's voice remained calm and professional. You tortured our people. We followed standard interrogation procedures. You tortured our people, Morrison repeated, as if the hegemony commander hadn't spoken. What happened next would stay with Zeftar for the rest of his life. The humans didn't attack immediately. Instead, Morrison began asking questions about the hegemony commander's family, his home world, his personal beliefs, his cultural traditions. With each answer, Morrison shared information that should have been impossible for him to know. Details about the commander's children, the location of his family's private residence, the names of his religious leaders, personal secrets that no enemy should have discovered. How do you know these things? The hegemony commander demanded. Morrison smiled the same cold smile Zeftar had seen on the first day. We've been watching you for months, learning about you. understanding what matters to you. And now we're going to take it all away. The massacre that followed was swift and brutal. But the real horror was the planning behind it. The humans had orchestrated the entire exchange as a trap. They had spent months gathering intelligence on specific enemy officers. They had manipulated the prisoner exchange process to lure their targets into the open. They hadn't just planned to kill their enemies. They had planned to destroy them psychologically first as they walked away from the killing field. Foster fell into step beside Zephyr. "You look disturbed," she observed. "Your species fights differently than others," Zephyr managed to say. "How so?" "Most species fight to win battles. You fight to win minds." Foster nodded approvingly. "Now you're beginning to understand us." But Zephyr wasn't sure he wanted to understand. What he had witnessed went beyond simple military tactics. The humans waged war like artists, crafting elaborate psychological masterpieces designed to break their enemies. Spirits before breaking their bodies. They didn't just kill. They created fear. They didn't just win battles. They destroyed the enemy's will to fight future battles. They turned warfare itself into a weapon. As he lay in his bunk that night, Zephyr wondered if his species had made a terrible mistake in allying with humanity. They had thought they were gaining powerful friends. Instead, they might have awakened something that the galaxy wasn't prepared to face. The humans hadn't just learned to fight. They had learned to make war itself afraid. 2 weeks after the prisoner exchange, Zephyr found himself in the ruins of New Shanghai Colony. The hegemony had attacked the civilian settlement 3 months earlier. What they left behind made Zephyr's stomachs turn. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the sky. Scorch marks covered every surface. The smell of death still lingered in certain areas, despite the time that had passed. 40,000 civilians, Colonel Lisa Martinez said as she walked through the destroyed streets. Men, women, children. The hegemony didn't just kill them. They made it slow, made it painful, made it public. Zephyr had requested to embed with Martinez's unit after hearing about their mission. Intelligence sources claimed she was hunting a specific hegemony commander named Vexral. What Zephyr didn't expect was the methodical way she approached. This hunt. Martinez stopped at what used to be a school. The walls were covered with burn marks in deliberate patterns. They lined up the teachers first, she said in a conversational tone. Made the children watch. Then they worked their way through the students by age. Oldest first. The recordings they sent to other colonies showed everything. Recordings? Zephyr asked. Psychological warfare. They wanted other human settlements to see what happened here. They wanted to break our will to resist. Martinez kicked a piece of rubble. It had the opposite effect. Private Ben Clark, barely old enough to serve, looked pale as he examined the school's remains. "Ma'am, how? Do we know all these details?" Martinez smiled, and Zephyr recognized the same cold expression he had seen on Morrison's face. "Because we've been studying them, soldier. For 3 months, we've been learning everything about the unit that did this. Their commander's name is Vexral. He has 2 wives and 5 children back on Hegemony Prime. He collects ancient weapons. He writes poetry about the beauty of conquest. He has a chronic digestive condition that requires special medication twice daily." Clark looked confused. "Why do we need to know about his stomach problems?" "Because," Martinez said, "we're going to use everything we know to destroy him. Not just kill him, destroy him." Dr. Susan Walsh emerged from a nearby building carrying her medical scanner. The same medic from the prisoner exchange now worked as part of Martinez's team. Her face showed no emotion as she reported her findings. 17 more bodies in the basement, she said. They were tortured for information about defensive positions. The hegemony used techniques designed to maximize pain while keeping the victims conscious as long as possible. Zefter noticed that Walsh spoke about torture and murder the same way she might discuss the weather. The humans had become comfortable with horror in a way that disturbed him deeply. Any useful intelligence? Martinez asked. Yes, the torture patterns matched Thexral's personal signature. He likes to use electrical stimulation combined with sensory deprivation. Always starts with the hands and works inward. It's like he has a system. Martinez nodded approvingly. Good. Add it to the profile. Over the following days, Zefter watched. The humans build what they called a comprehensive target analysis of Commander Thexral. They didn't just gather military intelligence. They studied his psychology, his personal relationships, his cultural background, his individual fears and desires. They intercepted his personal communications with his family. They analyzed his poetry for emotional vulnerabilities. They tracked his medical supply requests to understand his physical weaknesses. They even studied recordings of his voice to identify stress patterns and personality traits. This is more than intelligence gathering, Zefter observed one evening as Martinez reviewed files on her target. This is personal. It's always personal. Martinez replied. War isn't about nations or governments or political systems. It's about individual people making individual choices to hurt other individual people. When you understand that, you understand how to fight back. She showed him a photograph of Thexral's family. His oldest son just started military academy. His youngest daughter has a learning disability that requires special tutoring. His primary wife runs a charity organization for war orphans. His secondary wife is a sculptor whose work focuses on themes of peace and harmony. Why are you telling me this? Zefter asked. Because, Martinez said, Thexral thinks his family is safe. He thinks his personal life is separate from his military actions. He thinks he can murder our children and go home to hug his own children. We're going to teach him otherwise. The trap Martinez designed was elegant in its complexity. She spent 2 weeks feeding false intelligence to hegemony forces. She made it appear that human reinforcements were arriving at specific locations. She created fake supply shipments that suggested major offensive operations. She built an entire fictional military campaign that existed only in enemy intelligence reports. All of it was designed to draw Thexral to one specific location at one specific time. He'll come himself, Martinez predicted. His psychological profile shows he needs to personally oversee operations he considers important. His ego won't let him delegate this. She was right. Thexral arrived with a full company of soldiers to investigate what he believed was a major human supply depot. Instead, he found Martinez waiting for him in the ruins of a bombed-out factory. But Martinez didn't attack immediately. Instead, she initiated communication on standard military frequencies. Commander Thexral, her voice echoed through the factory complex. I have information about your family. The hegemony forces stopped advancing. Zefter could hear confused voices through their communication channels. This wasn't standard military procedure. Enemies didn't usually discuss family matters during combat operations. Your son failed his first academy examination, Martinez continued. He's struggling with the mathematics requirements. Your youngest daughter had another learning episode last week. The tutors think she might need additional medication. Your primary wife's charity received a large donation from an anonymous source. Your secondary wife just finished a sculpture called Mothers of the Lost. It's quite beautiful. Silence stretched across the battlefield. Zefral realized that Martinez wasn't just sharing intelligence. She was demonstrating that human forces had been watching Thexral's family for months, that they could reach his loved ones whenever they chose. How? Thexral's voice finally came through the speakers. We've been learning about you, Martinez replied. The same way you learned about our families before you killed them. The same way you studied our children before you tortured them. The same methodical, personal approach you used in New Shanghai. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a systematic dismantling of everything Vexril valued. Martinez had positioned her forces not just to kill the hegemony soldiers, but to capture specific individuals. Vexril-S intelligence officer, his communications specialist, his personal aide. One by one, she extracted them from the battlefield and executed them while forcing Vexril to watch. But she saved the worst for last. Your family thinks you're a hero, she told Vexril over the communication channel. Your children believe you're fighting to protect innocent people. Your wives think you represent honor and justice. Should we tell them the truth about what you did here? She didn't threaten to kill his family. That would have been simple and direct. Instead, she threatened to destroy their image of him. 2. Send them recordings of his actions in New Shanghai, to show them exactly what kind of person they loved and supported. For a warrior culture like the hegemony, the destruction of honor and reputation was worse than death. Vexril broke. Zefter watched through his scope as the enemy commander's posture collapsed. His soldiers looked to him for orders, but he could only stare at the speakers broadcasting Martinez's voice. You have a choice, Martinez continued. You can die here as a monster, and your family will eventually learn the truth about what you've done. Or you can surrender, confess your crimes, and let your family keep their illusions about your honor. The hegemony commander chose surrender. But that wasn't the end of Martinez's plan. She recorded Vexril's confession. She documented his admission of war crimes. She captured his breakdown on video as he described the systematic torture and murder of human civilians. Then she broadcast it to every hegemony military unit in the sector. Now they know their commander is a broken coward, she explained to Zefter as they watched enemy forces retreating from their positions. They know he gave up military secrets to protect his personal reputation. They know he chose his family's feelings over his soldiers' lives. The psychological impact spread through hegemony forces like a virus. Officers began questioning their own commanders. Soldiers wondered if their leaders would abandon them to protect personal interests. The entire enemy command structure began to fracture as trust broke down at every level. Dr. Walsh approached Martinez with a medical update. The prisoner is asking for his medication. His digestive condition is causing him significant pain. Let him suffer, Martinez replied. He can have his medicine after he provides intelligence on every operation he's planned for the next 6 months. Zeftar realized that even Vexril's medical needs had become another weapon in Martinez's arsenal. The humans had turned everything about their enemy into a tool for his destruction. This isn't justice, Zeftar said quietly. The liberation of Camp Desolation happened at dawn. Zeftar crouched behind Major Ryan Cooper as human forces surrounded the hegemony prison facility. Intelligence reports suggested the camp held 200 human prisoners of war. What they found inside would change everything Zeftar thought he understood about human morality. Remember the rules of engagement, Cooper told his soldiers over the radio. We follow the Geneva Conventions. We treat prisoners humanely. We document everything for the War Crimes Tribunal. No exceptions. Lieutenant Kate Miller stood beside Cooper with her recording equipment ready. As the unit's military prosecutor, her job was to ensure legal compliance during liberation operations. She had prosecuted dozens of war crimes cases and took pride in maintaining proper standards, even during combat. Visual confirmation of prisoners in the main compound, reported Corporal Tony Russo from his forward position. They look bad, sir. The assault lasted 12 minutes. Hegemony. Guards offered minimal resistance before surrendering. Most seemed relieved that their duty at the camp was over. Cooper's forces secured the facility with professional efficiency. Following every protocol exactly as trained. Then they opened the first prisoner barracks. Zephyr had seen combat footage before. He had witnessed the aftermath of bombardments and firefights. But nothing had prepared him for what systematic torture looked like when practiced as policy over months of time. The human prisoners were barely recognizable as members of their species. Malnutrition had reduced them to skeletal figures. Torture had left permanent physical damage. Psychological abuse had broken their minds in ways that might never heal. Many couldn't even speak coherently when rescue arrived. Dr. Susan Walsh moved from prisoner to prisoner with her medical scanner, documenting injuries with clinical precision. But Zephyr noticed her hands shaking as she worked. Her professional composure was cracking with each new horror she recorded. Systematic starvation, she reported to Miller. Deliberate medical neglect. Evidence of repeated electrical torture. Chemical burns from experimental interrogation techniques. Sexual assault. Psychological conditioning designed to break identity and will. Miller recorded everything with her legal equipment, maintaining proper chain of custody for evidence. "We need to interview the guards," she told Cooper. "Build cases for prosecution. Make sure we follow proper procedures." Cooper nodded, but his jaw was tight with suppressed emotion. "Bring me General Veximer." He was the camp commander. Veximer was captured trying to escape through a back exit. He was a professional soldier from an old military family, trained in the traditional codes of warfare. When brought before Cooper, he maintained dignified posture despite his defeat. "I demand treatment according to the established conventions of war," Veximer stated. "I am a prisoner of military rank and deserve appropriate respect." Cooper studied him for a long moment. "Did you extend that same respect to our people?" "I followed orders from my superiors." Military necessity required enhanced interrogation of enemy combatants. Miller stepped forward with a recorder. "For the legal record, can you define enhanced interrogation as you practiced it here?" Veximer seemed comfortable discussing his methods. He described starvation schedules designed to maximize compliance. He explained torture techniques intended to extract information while keeping prisoners alive for extended periods. He detailed psychological conditioning programs meant to break human mental resistance. He spoke about it all with professional pride, as if discussing successful business practices. "This is evidence," Miller whispered to Cooper. "Perfect admissible testimony for war crimes prosecution. We can build multiple cases from this confession alone." But Cooper wasn't listening to legal procedures anymore. He was watching Corporal Russo help a human prisoner who couldn't walk without assistance. The prisoner looked about 18 years old. He had been captured during his first combat deployment 6 months earlier. "What did you do to the young ones?" Cooper asked Veximer. "Age makes no difference in warfare," the hegemony general replied. "Young humans often possessed valuable tactical intelligence. We extracted what we needed using appropriate methods." Cooper's radio crackled with reports from his soldiers throughout the camp. Each barracks revealed new horrors. Each cell block contained fresh evidence of systematic brutality. The scope of organized torture was beyond anything they had imagined. "Sir," Russo's voice came through the speaker, "you need to see the medical facility." They were experimenting on people, testing how much damage human bodies could survive. Miller looked at her legal equipment, then at Cooper. "We have enough evidence for dozens of prosecutions. Multiple life sentences. Justice through proper legal channels." Cooper walked to the window and looked out at the liberated prisoners. Many sat in the sunlight, unable to believe their captivity was over. Others rocked back and forth, too damaged to understand they were safe. A few tried to help their fellow prisoners, sharing what little strength they had left. "Justice," Cooper repeated quietly. "Yes, sir. Legal justice through established international law. Cooper turned back to Veximer. Did you give them legal justice when they asked for mercy? Military necessity required. Cooper interrupted him. Did you follow international law when you starved 18-year-old soldiers for information about patrol routes? The conventions of war allow. Did you respect their rights when you conducted medical experiments on prisoners of war? Veximer's confident expression began to waver. I followed orders from legitimate authority. Cooper walked closer to the hegemony general. So did the guards at the concentration camps. So did the officers who ran the gulags. Following orders isn't a legal defense for war crimes. Miller sensed the shift in Cooper's tone. Sir, we need to maintain proper procedures. The legal system requires. The legal system, Cooper said, still staring at Veximer, assumes that both sides recognize basic concepts of human dignity. What do we do when one side abandons those concepts entirely? Dr. Walsh entered the room carrying her medical findings. Major, I've completed preliminary examinations. 70% of the prisoners show evidence of torture. 40% have permanent physical damage. Nearly all exhibit severe psychological trauma. Some may never recover. How long? Cooper asked. Sir, how long were they tortured? Walsh consulted her notes. Based on healing patterns and injury types, a systematic abuse began immediately after capture. For some prisoners, that means 8 months of daily torture. 8 months. Cooper let that number settle in his mind. 8 months of deliberate cruelty inflicted on young soldiers who had surrendered expecting treatment according to military law. Lieutenant Miller, he said quietly. Yes, sir? Take your recording equipment and document the prisoner conditions. I want detailed evidence of every violation of international law. Already doing that, sir. Good. When you're finished, I want you to leave the facility and establish a legal processing center at the main base. Miller looked confused. What? About prisoner interrogations? We need testimony from the guards and commanders. Cooper finally looked away from Veximer. There won't be any prisoner interrogations. Sir, I don't understand. You're leaving. Now, take your legal equipment and your proper procedures and get out. Miller stared at him. Major, you're violating direct orders. We have specific instructions to maintain legal standards during prisoner processing. And I'm ordering you to leave before I violate those standards. The room fell silent. Miller realized what Cooper was planning. Sir, if you proceed without legal oversight, any actions you take will be criminal. Court-martial offenses. Prison. Sentences. Cooper nodded. Probably. It's not worth destroying your career over revenge. This isn't revenge, Cooper said. This is education. Miller gathered her equipment with shaking hands. I'm required to report any violations of legal procedure. Do what you have to do, Lieutenant, but do it from somewhere else. After Miller left, Cooper turned to his remaining soldiers. Anyone who wants to leave with a lieutenant is free to go. What happens next is going to be off the books. No official records. No legal protections. Anyone who stays accepts full responsibility for their actions. Corporal Russo spoke for the group. We stay, sir. Dr. Walsh put away her medical scanner. I'll need to document enhanced interrogation effects for comparison purposes. Cooper smiled grimly. Then let's begin Veximer's education. What followed? Over the next 6 hours would haunt Zephyr for the rest of his life. Cooper and his soldiers didn't torture their prisoners in the traditional sense. Instead, they provided them with exactly the same treatment human prisoners had received at Camp Desolation. They fed Veximer the same starvation rations human prisoners had survived on. They subjected him to the same medical procedures he had authorized on captured humans. They used the same psychological conditioning techniques he had developed for breaking enemy morale. But the most disturbing part was how they justified everything. They did. This is education, Not torture, Dr. Walsh explained, as she administered the same experimental drugs that had been tested on human prisoners. We're teaching General Veximer about the effects of his own policies. This is research, not abuse, Russo said as he demonstrated the electrical stimulation devices found in the camp's interrogation rooms. Admiral Grace Thompson stood before the largest tactical display Zefter had ever seen. Proxima Station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its rotating sections housing 3 million souls. 2 million were hegemony civilians. 1 million were human prisoners and forced laborers. The station's strategic position controlled shipping routes through 7 star systems. The mathematics are simple, Thompson said to her staff officers. We take the station, we cut off hegemony supply lines, and end the war 6 months early. We don't take the station. The war continues for another year with an estimated 4 million additional casualties. Zefta had requested assignment to Thompson's flagship after hearing about the Proxima operation. What he found was a floating city of 30,000 humans dedicated to solving an impossible equation. How do you capture a heavily defended space station without killing the civilians? Inside? Commander Pete Hayes studied the tactical projections with obvious discomfort. Admiral, our best estimates show minimum civilian casualties at 400,000. That's assuming perfect execution and optimal conditions. And if we attempt a surgical approach? Thompson asked. Civilian casualties drop to maybe 50,000, but military casualties jump to 15,000 of our own people. Plus, the operation takes 3 times longer, giving the enemy time to reinforce. Dr. Alex Kim, the fleet's chief weapons researcher, highlighted specific sections of the station. We could use the new plasma weapons to minimize structural damage. Target only military sections. Avoid civilian areas entirely. Effectiveness? Thompson asked. 70% chance of success with current weapons. 95% with the experimental systems. Thompson studied the data with the same calm attention she might give to a supply inventory. Tell me about the experimental systems. Kim's presentation filled the main screen with technical specifications. Quantum destabilizer warheads. They disrupt molecular bonds in targeted materials. Very precise, very clean, no radiation. No long-term contamination. Side effects? Well, ... Double Kim hesitated. The quantum field affects organic tissue differently than metals or ceramics. Anything living within the effect radius experiences cellular breakdown, essentially instantaneous death. Hayes stared at the specifications. You're talking about a weapon that kills everything alive while leaving infrastructure intact. Only within the targeted areas, Kim clarified. We can control the field radius down to 10-meter precision. Hit military sections, spare civilian. Quarters. What about the forced laborers? Hayes asked. The human prisoners working in industrial sections? Kim adjusted his calculations. If we target during shift changes, we minimize exposure to our own people. Maybe 10,000 human casualties instead of 50,000. Zefter watched the staff officers process this information. They discussed mass murder with the same professional tone they used for supply requisitions. Numbers and percentages replaced moral considerations. Lives became mathematical variables in optimization equations. Legal opinion? Thompson asked her judge advocate. The quantum weapons haven't been tested in combat, the legal officer replied. No international treaties specifically prohibit their use. Technically, they qualify as precision weapons designed to minimize collateral damage. Humanitarian concerns? Difficult to assess. The weapons cause less suffering than conventional bombardment. Death is instantaneous rather than prolonged. From a purely humanitarian perspective, they might actually be preferable to standard ordnance. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Kim, what's your personal recommendation? Kim looked uncomfortable for the first time during the briefing. Admiral, as a scientist, I have to say the weapons work exactly as designed. They're effective, precise, and clean. As a human being ... double quotes, he paused. I'm not sure I should be making moral judgments about weapons of mass destruction. But you have an opinion. I think, Kim said carefully, that some problems require tools that good people don't want to use. The question isn't whether the weapons are moral. The question is whether the situation justifies using immoral tools. Zefter realized he was witnessing the institutionalization of evil. These humans weren't monsters or psychopaths. They were professionals doing their jobs with careful attention to legal and practical details. They had created bureaucratic processes that made mass murder feel like rational policymaking. Commander Hayes, Thompson said, your assessment? Hayes looked at the casualty projections one more time. Admiral, I've served for 20 years. I've seen what happens when military operations drag on too long. Extended conflicts always produce higher casualties than quick, decisive action. If we can end the war in weeks instead of months, we save lives overall. Even considering the civilian deaths? Even considering them. War isn't about choosing between good and evil. It's about choosing between different types of evil and picking the one that causes the least total harm. Thompson turned to address the entire staff. I want detailed targeting plans for the quantum weapons. Primary targets are military command centers, weapons systems, and strategic communications. Secondary targets are industrial facilities with minimal civilian presence. Tertiary targets are anything that contributes to the station's defensive capabilities. What about the civilian areas? Hayes asked. Untouched. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to win a war. And the human prisoners in the industrial sections. Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Acceptable losses. They knew the risks when they joined the military. Our responsibility is to the human prisoners we can save, not the ones we can't. Over the following days, Zefter watched the humans refine their mass murder with scientific precision. They calculated optimal firing solutions to maximize military damage while minimizing civilian casualties. They scheduled the attack during shift changes to reduce human prisoner exposure. They prepared humanitarian aid packages for surviving civilians. They planned genocide with the same attention to detail they brought to birthday parties. Dr. Kim worked 18-hour days perfecting the quantum weapons. We've improved precision by another 12%, he reported. Civilian casualties now estimated at 350,000 instead of 400,000. Outstanding work, Thompson replied. Anything else we can do to reduce that number? We could target during the station's night cycle. Most civilians will be in residential areas, further from military targets. Do it, Commander Hayes raised a concern about post-attack operations. Admiral, after we deploy the quantum weapons, how do we explain their effects to the galactic community? Other species are going to ask questions about weapons that leave infrastructure intact while killing everything alive. Thompson considered this. We classify the weapons specifications. Publicly, we report that Proxima Station suffered catastrophic life support failures during the battle, technical malfunction, tragic accident, a cover-up, operational security. The details of our weapons capabilities are military secrets. Other governments don't need to know how we achieved victory, only that we did. Zefter realized that the humans were planning not just mass murder, but the systematic concealment of their crimes. They would kill hundreds of thousands of civilians, then lie about it to the rest of the galaxy. The most disturbing part was how normal it all seemed to them. What about our own people? Hayes asked. The crews firing these weapons are going to know what they're doing. They're following lawful orders from legitimate authority, Thompson replied. Military personnel don't have the luxury of questioning strategic decisions during wartime. Some might refuse to fire. Then they'll be court-martialed for failure to follow orders during combat operations. Military discipline requires obedience to command authority. Dr. Kim finished his final weapons tests. All systems ready, Admiral? The quantum destabilizers are armed and targeted. Thompson studied the tactical display one last time. 3 million lives hung in the balance of her decision. Military necessity demanded action. Moral principles demanded restraint. Human survival required victory. Fleet operations. This is Admiral Thompson. Execute Order Omega-7. Confirmed. Admiral, Order Omega-7 is execute. The quantum weapons fired in perfect silence. From the flagship's observation deck, Zefter watched beams of energy strike Proxima Station with surgical precision. The weapons made no sound, produced no visible explosions, generated no dramatic effects. The station's lights simply went out in targeted sections. Military targets neutralized, reported the weapons officer. Estimated 347,000 civilian casualties. Estimated 9,000 human prisoner casualties. Station infrastructure intact and ready for occupation. Thompson acknowledged the report with professional calm. Landing forces begin occupation procedures. Medical teams prepare humanitarian aid for survivors. Intelligence teams secure all station records and communications. As human forces boarded the conquered station, Thompson approached Zefter at the observation deck. You look disturbed by our methods. Your species killed nearly 400,000 civilians in 10 minutes, Zefter replied. Then you discussed it like a successful business transaction. We ended a war that would have killed 4 million people over the next year, Thompson corrected. We chose the option that saved the most lives. 6 months after Proxima Station fell, Zeftar sat in his quarters aboard a diplomatic transport heading to the Galactic Council chambers. His final report lay open on his desk, but the words seemed inadequate to describe what he had witnessed. How do you explain to civilized beings that their protectors were the very monsters they feared? The war was over. Humanity had won through methods that made their allies question whether victory was worth the cost. Hegemony forces had surrendered. After learning about Proxima Station, though they still believed the civilian deaths were caused by technical malfunctions. The official report supported that Story. President Helen Ross would address the Galactic Council in 3 days. Early rumors suggested she would request full membership for humanity in the galactic community. After everything Zefter had seen, the idea terrified him. Final report, day 112. He spoke into his recorder. Subject exhibits all characteristics of systematic institutional darkness. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols and restricted contact procedures. He stopped recording. Even his own words sounded inadequate. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Ambassador Krevel's face appeared on his communication screen. The elderly Valdorian diplomat looked tired and worried. Zefter, I've read your preliminary reports. Are you certain about these observations? The implications are disturbing. Every detail has been verified multiple times, Zefter replied. I documented everything I could without compromising operational security. The Council is split on how to respond. Some members want to grant humanity full membership immediately. They point to human military effectiveness and strategic value. Others want to establish containment protocols. What does the Security Committee recommend? Kreval's expression darkened. General Marcus Stone briefed them yesterday on human post-war planning. Apparently, humanity intends to establish permanent military bases throughout the galaxy. 4. Our protection, they claim. Zefter felt his blood chill. Occupation forces. Peacekeeping forces, according to President Ross. They want to ensure that no other species develops the capability to threaten galactic stability. The transport arrived at the council station 2 days later. Zefter had attended diplomatic conferences before, but never one where the central question was whether to welcome or quarantine an entire species. The normally calm corridors buzzed with nervous energy as delegates debated humanity's future. Role in galactic affairs. The mathematics are clear, argued Representative Vekaran from the Hegemony delegation. Human military capabilities exceed our defensive preparations by several orders of magnitude. If they choose to become conquerors instead of protectors, we have no effective means of resistance. Council Security Director Morden displayed tactical analyses on the main screen. Human forces currently control 47 strategic locations throughout the galaxy. They claim these are temporary positions to ensure post-war stability. However, the locations provide comprehensive coverage of all major shipping routes and communication networks. Are you suggesting humanity is positioning for conquest? Asked the Centauri representative. I'm suggesting, Mordan replied, that their current military deployment would be identical whether their intentions are protective or aggressive. The difference lies in political will, not military capability. Zefter listened to the debates while reviewing his notes one final time. Each species represented in the council chamber benefited from human military protection. Each delegation enjoyed security that came from human willingness to do what they considered morally unacceptable. Yet none of them understood the true cost of that protection. President Ross arrived with a small diplomatic team and minimal security. She appeared confident and relaxed, as if addressing a gathering of friends rather than potential judges. General Stone accompanied her, along with several other officials Zefter didn't recognize. Honored representatives, Ross began her address. 6 months ago, our species faced a choice between survival and extinction. The hegemony had demonstrated their willingness to use any methods necessary to achieve victory. We could either match their resolve or accept defeat. She paused to let that statement settle. We chose survival. Representative Vexmo, speaking for the surviving hegemony government, stood to respond. President Ross, your forces used experimental weapons against civilian populations. The technical failures at Proxima Station resulted in massive casualties among non-combatants. Technical failures are unfortunate, Ross replied smoothly. War creates unpredictable situations where even the best technology can malfunction. We deeply regret any civilian casualties that resulted from equipment failures during combat operations. Zefter realized he was watching a masterful performance. Ross acknowledged the deaths while maintaining the fiction that they were accidental. She expressed regret while accepting no responsibility. She demonstrated sympathy while revealing no guilt. The question before this council, Ross continued, is not what happened during wartime, but what will happen during peace. Humanity offers our continued military protection to all member species. We will maintain defensive positions throughout the galaxy to ensure that no aggressor can threaten peaceful civilizations. Council Leader Yurseth asked the question everyone was thinking. What assurances can you provide that human forces will be used only for defensive purposes? Ross smiled with apparent sincerity. The same assurances any species provides about their future intentions. Our word, backed by our demonstrated commitment to protecting innocent life. But your military capabilities far exceed those of any other species, pressed the Alcarian delegate. What prevents humanity from using superior force to impose your will on weaker civilizations? The same thing that prevented us from using superior force against civilian populations during the war, Ross replied. Our moral principles and commitment to civilized behavior. Zefter wanted to scream. She was lying with such casual confidence that even he almost believed her. She spoke of moral principles after authorizing weapons of mass destruction. She claimed commitment to protecting innocent life after calculating acceptable civilian casualties. She promised defensive intentions. While positioning forces for galactic domination, General Stone stepped forward to address military concerns. Human defensive strategy is based on forward positioning and rapid response capabilities. We maintain forces at strategic locations to intercept threats before they can develop into existential dangers. And if the Council votes to restrict human military deployment, ask the security director. Stone's expression didn't change, but his tone carried subtle menace. Then the Council would be responsible for providing alternative security arrangements. Humanity would respect such decisions, though we couldn't guarantee protection for species that choose to rely on other defensive measures. The threat was clear: accept human protection on human terms, or face potential enemies without human support. The galaxy could choose to be protected by humanity, or to be vulnerable to forces that humanity might not choose to fight. After the formal presentations, Zefter found himself alone with Ambassador Krival in a private conference room. The old diplomat looked exhausted and defeated. "They've checkmated us," Krival said quietly. "We can't live with them, and we can't live without them. What will the Council decide? What choice do we have? Grant them membership, accept their protection, and hope they continue to view us as allies rather than subjects. And if they don't?" Krival gestured helplessly. "Then we'll discover what happens when the monsters decide they no longer need to pretend to be heroes." A council vote took place the following day. Humanity was granted full membership by a margin of 73 to 27 with 15 abstentions. The close vote reflected deep concerns about human methods, but practical necessity won over moral objections. President Ross accepted membership with gracious humility. Humanity is honored to join this community of civilized species. We pledge to use our capabilities in service of galactic peace and security. After the ceremonies, Zefter attended a reception where diplomats from various species mingled with human officials. The conversations were polite and professional, but underneath ran currents of fear and uncertainty. "Remarkable people, these humans," commented the Centauri ambassador to a small group. "They've managed to make genocide feel like peacekeeping. They've made us complicit in our own protection," replied the Valdorian delegate. "We benefit from their violence while maintaining the illusion of moral superiority." Dr. Alex Kim, the human weapons researcher, overheard these comments. "The galaxy needed someone willing to do necessary things," he said calmly. "You can maintain your principles because we're willing to compromise ours. And you're comfortable with that arrangement?" Asked the Centauri ambassador. Kim smiled coldly. "We're comfortable with survival. Everything else is luxury." Later that evening, Zefter completed his final report. He wrote about human tactical innovation and strategic thinking. He documented their psychological warfare capabilities and their institutional approach to moral compromise. He described their ability to rationalize any action in service of larger goals, but he also wrote about their genuine care for their own people, their willingness to sacrifice for causes they believed in.